2 hours later.
I know we haven't been on here lately. I just wanted to give a quick update. So yeah, we've been a little bit busy with our real life, and there hasn't been a ton of news to cover. But a couple things. We did get a chance with our wives to go out and see Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King live in concert. And so what that was, it was really fun. In fact, this is maybe one of the best experiences I've ever had outside of seeing these movies for the first time in theaters, opening night. But going in person, and maybe this was better, but going in person to have a full orchestra with 3 choirs. So it's a full-on big band and string orchestra with 3 different choirs playing the music and obviously the background choir parts of the film as they come up on the screen. And yeah, it was phenomenal. Honestly, it kind of spoiled me. I don't know how to go back to watching them normally again because the music, I mean, Howard Shore will go down. If he doesn't do anything ever again, he'll go down as one of the best composers of all time for that score. And it is so magical to hear it in person while you're seeing the visuals on the screen. And you really get the nuance and the intricacies of the different themes and parts for each segment. And so, yeah, that was fantastic. And so, yeah, we'll probably talk a bit more about that in some later videos, but I just wanted to throw this together now to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about I'm going to be playing through the Gollum video game that came out that was basically a terrible mess of a game. I'll be playing a little bit of that as we get closer to Hunt for Gollum. Dune Part 2 did not live up to the hype when it came to Oscars. Now, Oscars are kind of shady, and it's a kind of a mess to delve into that. But needless to say, it doesn't have the same Oscar theatrics as Lord of the Rings did, and so in a joking way, it's not the new Lord of the Rings. I personally didn't think it was. I thought it was fine. I just didn't love it as much as everyone else did. But it doesn't seem to have the staying power as Lord of the Rings does. Maybe going forward, we'll see. I just don't see it. I think Lord of the Rings still is the pinnacle, and Dune was just a very good sci-fi movie. Let's see. We got Rings of Power eventually coming out. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about House of the Dragon when that comes back, although I've kind of stopped watching that show. I wasn't doing it for me. A lot of these shows, I'm maybe different, but I prefer the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones. There's almost like a 90s 90s fantasy TV show vibe to them in some way, and once they get into King's Landing and like we're in season 4 and 5, where I think the show starts falling apart, that's where a lot of people really like it, because they're like, oh, look at all this political intrigue and stuff. But it's not done well at that point. You miss a lot of it. A lot of the political intrigue that was good for Game of Thrones early on was from different characters in different settings getting news. And that was your only source. But once you're like in King's Landing and everyone's acting all suspicious and whatnot, it kind of just starts to feel a bit more like, I don't know, just like a run-of-the-mill political drama or something like that. And it doesn't have that same magic that it did. So that's what this new, House of the Dragon kind of feels like that too. It just doesn't have the same charm. I don't even know if I'm going to give that other Game of Thrones show a chance. Like, I'll see what other people think of it, I guess. Skeleton Crew, that was kind of fun. I don't know why everyone was upset about it. Yeah, it was for kids, but it was still kind of fun. Still, Treasure Island-y, space adventure set in Star Wars with some decent moments. I'm not the Star Wars guy. I'm way more on Lord of the Rings. My Star Wars companion is not here with me. He is busy at the moment. We will get back at some point to talk about all these things, but just wanted to throw that out there that we did watch that together, and we had a good time with it. And that's a kind of just a quick rundown on what's been going on. And I'm looking forward to a lot of this stuff. Oh, the big one, because I forgot if we had talked about this before. The War of the Rohirrim. We saw that. We are definitely going to talk about that at some point. It was fine. A bit long for what it was. The animation could use a bit of work. Story-wise, I thought it was pretty good, and it's pretty close to the lore as well. So, like that, the people complaining about that's not why it wasn't good. Like, the thing is, it was animated, so that was already a hurdle for people. Myself kind of included. Like, I say that it's not a hurdle, but when it's that long of a movie, it is a little bit. And so there's that, plus the fact that it did follow the story with a few changes, but it didn't. There's parts of the story that are gaps, like time jumps, and that's something that I've criticized, like Game of Thrones for doing, as well. And there's so much stuff can happen during those time jumps, and because it's weird to have characters like refer to things that just happened. Sometimes they don't do it, and you're just supposed to go with it. But I do have questions about some of the time jumps and what transpired, because to me, and again, same as Game of Thrones, I have issues with this too. But an event will happen. For example, in House of the Dragon, when Rhaenyra is going around and people are asking for her hand in marriage, there is a murder. Well, I guess it's a duel that someone dies at in front of her in the show. I don't know what happened in the books because I don't care about those books, but in the show that happens. And we don't see the ramifications of that. We get it mentioned later on in another episode. It's mentioned that like these houses don't like each other. But like, what happened? Like, was the king ever petitioned to intervene? Like, what were the people thinking at the time? Was there a mini bat? Like, none of that stuff is answered. And same as in this one, where there's some time jumps, and you're like, well, wait, what happened between now and then? Like, did they go looking for this guy? Did they go and like, what were these people doing? How did this person get so isolated from the king that he ended up doing that? Like, how did this stuff all go down? It's not quite answered in a way that is effective. So for that reason, it was just an okay movie. Not the worst. I still think some of the Hobbit movies are probably worse than this, but the Hobbit movies are more fun. So that's the other thing. This one wasn't super fun. It was still decent. It's just, I don't know if it has rewatchability the way that the original trilogy does. and to some extent the Hobbit movies do, but the Hobbit movies is more fun. Like, it's more just goofiness. And I've talked about my thoughts on that at length already, so I'll save the spiel here. But I do find that the Hobbit movies are probably more rewatchable than this. And then obviously the original trilogy is the most rewatchable. Literally just rewatched it as I said earlier in the video. So yeah, that's the sort of rundown on everything Lord of the Rings and things going on with the channel. We will be back up at some point in the near future, just sort of getting real life squared away. And yeah, I'm hoping to get just more casual videos up as well, doing Lord of the Ringsy video games and stuff like that. Maybe reacting to some other people talking about Lord of the Rings stuff. So yeah, stay tuned going forward with that. Oh, and one more thing, because I don't know if I'll remember this just before I go. James Bond, I'm a big James Bond fan. So like Lord of the Rings is my main my main attraction here, but I'm also a big James Bond fan, and Amazon just bought the rights to it. And I don't want this to become a look what they did to the Rings of Power. That's not exactly my initial, like, obviously there's that in the back of my head, but that's not my initial reaction. My problem is I don't think James Bond works as a show. I think it has to be a movie. And I also think it's one of the few franchises that I prefer to see in theaters when it comes out with a bunch of other James Bond fans. So sitting in my living room watching it won't have the same impact if that's what they do going forward. I really want it to be still in theaters, and I don't want it to be a show, because I think a James Bond show wouldn't work. If you read the books and that's the direction I want the next iteration of James Bond to do, is go back to its roots, do a period piece set in the 1950s with James Bond in that moment, in that era. If you've read the books, the chapters do not work as a show, at least not for me. Now, Reacher pulls it off. Reacher is another Amazon show that is able to take a book and make each chapter have, or each episode have good moments. And what I mean by good moments is moments that are more emotional, moments that are more actiony, moments that are more story driven. Like, they are able to bring it all together. Reacher's actually really well written for what it is. I don't think that works for James Bond, because Reacher doesn't let scenes breathe, which is fine, because the kind of the gimmick or the shtick of that show is there's a massive dude going around doing what's right and being manly, and being cool, which there's elements of James Bond there for sure, but it doesn't let scenes breathe, and so everything is super snappy and super quick. That is not James Bond. James Bond is slow, deadpan, meticulous, and you need to let a scene, you need to let that tension breathe. And you can't do that in a show where every episode needs an action scene. Every episode needs a scene where there's maybe some sexual tension. Every episode needs a scene where you reveal a little bit of his past, and it's a bit emotional, and it's tough for him to admit. And then you need to move the plot forward, but not too much, because you need to have more for the next episode. That won't work for James Bond, I don't think. And I'm hoping that Amazon doesn't go down that route.